Welcome to Taking Back Monday, where we are focused on no more Sunday Scaries and creating the best performing teams and achieving those dreams. I'm excited to welcome Victoria to my show today. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been talking about on Taking Back Monday is the idea of how do we create environments where, we're all going to have to work. It is a part of life, but how can we make that something that we truly enjoy and truly are proud of, and building something and being a part of something that means more than just a 9 to 5. So in your perspective, what is one piece of game-changing advice for building a high-performing team?
So for me, it is all about alignment. And that works at many levels. It's alignment in yourself. And if you're leading a team, it's about how you create alignment across that team and the individuals within it. And then on the broader spectrum, it's about how you create alignment across an organization. And I think it even works within our lives. We feel good when we are working in alignment with, there are different ways you might speak about it, your calling, your purpose, your values, what feels good, what energizes you, what motivates you. But in my experience, Mondays feel good when you are in alignment with what you're doing on a Monday. And teams feel good when teams are in alignment with each other and kind of gelling and pulling in the same direction. But for me, it's all about alignment.
I totally agree. I had joined a startup right out of college, and I used to tell people I will work ungodly amounts of hours, but I had so much fun and enjoyment in working with that team. We were working towards a shared vision. It didn't feel like I was walking into a job. It felt like I was walking into something that I truly had control and ownership over, even though I was just an employee.
Absolutely. I spent the last 6 years or so of my corporate career in very senior leadership in a very fast-growing, dynamic organization. The pressure was high, and I loved it because I felt like what I was doing mattered. It gave me meaningful purpose. I created a culture in which people were aligned and pulling in the same direction. It was joyful. And at the point at which I started noticing that was no longer the case, that was my cue that it was time for me to step away. Yeah. And, if I'd stayed, I would no longer have been aligned. I think that would have affected the culture because I was quite a visible leader. Things would have changed. And, sometimes when you're leading a team, you might notice that a particular individual seems to be at the center of some tensions or some difficulties. And it's very easy to kind of make that person wrong. But sometimes it's just that for whatever reason, they're not feeling it. They're not aligned to what that team is about. And that's not the same as having a uniform culture where everyone has the same background and have the same principles and approaches things the same way. It's really important not to do that, I would say. But energetically, people have to be feeling alignment to be at their best. And when people are at their best, the discretionary effort that comes from them and the passion and the productivity and the performance is just through the roof. We achieved things in my last role that people said couldn't be done. It's because we had alignment. It's absolutely because we had alignment.
And I want to point out what you just said, that it's important that you have diversity of skill and thought and perspective in your group, because if you're just totally uniform, like, that's not being in alignment. So when you say in alignment, I'm a leader. A lot of our listeners are business leaders. They work in customer facing roles typically. What do you mean by that word alignment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say alignment is when everyone has an understanding of and feels engaged by a well-articulated endpoint. So, and look, if you're not into micromanaging, then having a really well-articulated vision is vital, because then people use that as their barometer for their decision-making rather than coming to you and saying, what's the right answer? So alignment is about a really well-articulated endpoint that ideally people have felt a sense of co-creation of within reason. You can't necessarily delegate the decision-making to a 2,000 person organization or team, but people feeling a sense of engagement with that vision, maybe because they've helped shape it or helped explain what it means within their particular function or directorate. That's the first thing, clarity of outcome. And that might be a 5 or 10 year outcome that you create that clarity around. And then the next thing is clarity on the way we show up as we're delivering that future. And this is where it's not about everyone looking the same and having the same approach, but it's about shared values. It's about, okay, if there are 3 different ways we could make a certain something happen, are we clear enough on the way that feel right for the culture of this organization? And this is where in a team, if you have someone that's maybe creating tension or that doesn't feel so well aligned, it might be that they are persistently frustrated or annoyed that we're trying to do it this way, that people tend to understand that the way we do it here is this way. And even as I say that, I think there's a risk that could be misinterpreted as we've always done it this way, so we're going to carry on doing it this way. That's not what I mean. I just think there's a vibe, there's an energy to replace. It has a certain flavor. Some places are excitable and dynamic. Others are considered, and tempered, and gentler in the way they move. And if you're an excitable and dynamic person and you're working in an environment that is considered and gentle and, slower paced in the way it moves, you're going to become frustrated and people are going to find you frustrating. And that's not about your background, your ethnicity, or even your kind of direct approach to the way you do your work. It's about the kind of way you show up, the energy that you show up with. And likewise, if you're someone that's, I don't know, who has a value of data first, and you're in an environment where people are all about creativity and risk, then clearly it's going to become problematic. So I think it's about clarity of outcome and then clarity of the values that we work to. Some places don't mind breaking rules and cutting corners. And if you're a high integrity person that likes to do things by the book, that's going to become difficult for you. The places are by the book and structured. And if you're a cut corners person, you're going to get into trouble there. So it's that, I think. It's that.
I think that's a really important distinction. And I was working with a client, and I'm a very out of the box kind of a person. Like, okay, how can we do this differently today than we did it yesterday? So all of my approach to work is, how do we innovate and create and do a little bit more of the, uncomfortable things that might only work 50% of the time, right? And I had a client who was very much a discerning, considering, slower to move. And it was a lot of frustration and a lot of frustration on my part, because I just felt like every single idea that I'd bring to the table was getting shot down, or they'd be into it for a minute. And then as soon as they started to realize like, oh, this might be uncomfortable, it got like washed away. And it took me a while to realize that it wasn't about me. It wasn't about them rejecting me personally. It was about them saying, hey, this doesn't fit into our corporate culture. Corporate is an organism in and of itself. And if it doesn't fit into the environment or to the ecosystem that we're introducing it into, that has nothing to do with me. It's not a slight on my talent. It's just wasn't the right fit for the thing that we were trying to do and the goal that they were trying to achieve in that environment.
Yeah. And I think what you say, that it's so important in the professional arena. So many people make themselves wrong or make other people wrong when actually it's just a matter of fit. And, you think of the job search game. So many people show up to an interview trying to sound like what they think the other party is looking for, which is basically a way to make sure you end up in a job that you're not very aligned to. Yeah. You have to show up as your whole self, and be open about your values, the way you like to work. And if that means you don't get the job because that scares the people on the other side of the table, well, then you wouldn't have thrived there. Like what you just described, Alyssa, your best value and energy was being kind of muted. So you could still do the job, but you weren't going to do it at maximum productivity and capability because some of your best value was being kind of dialed down by the culture of the client. So, getting into alignment is when we just the lid comes off of our performance and what we can do when we create those environments that we're really aligned to.
So I want you to put your leader hat on, right? What kind of, what simple techniques, or if I'm a leader listening to this and I say, hey, I think I've got a team that's not quite in alignment. I love the talent we have. They're great people. How can I work to bring my team back into alignment?
Yeah. So in a way, it depends what's quite showing up. So if there is quite a well understood culture and there are some issues of alignment around particular individuals, then engaging with those individuals, not in an accusatory, judgmental way, but acknowledging that things feel a bit bumpy at the moment and really kind of trying to understand what's that about, what's happening, what's important to you, where do you feel that things are going wrong. Good coaching shaped leadership is a great start point if there are issues around an individual. But if you have a team that's just not pulling together, it's really important to go through the process of creating alignment across your team. I liken it to if you have horses pulling a carriage, if the carriage is whatever the team is there to do, and the members of the team are the horses, if they're all pulling in different directions, the cart can't move forward. And actually, if they keep pulling hard, it breaks down. And that's when you get dysfunctional teams, toxic cultures, high turnover, all sorts of problems. You have to get your horses facing in the right direction. And the way you do that is to embark on a version of what I described at the organizational level, where you need to lead your team through a process of agreeing. How do we show up as a team? What is most important to us? What are we here to do? What does good look like? And it's really effective to do that with that team. I think it's really great when a leader goes into a team that they didn't previously look after and someone did. The great start point is to sit down individually and understand each of those team members, but then take them collectively through a process of kind of contracting together as a team. So if we know the organizational vision or strategy is this, what role do we want to play and what does good look like? 5 years from now, how will we know that we're high-fiving and saying, yeah, we did a great job? 3 years from now, 1 year from now. And also, how do we want to show up as a team? When the pressure's on, what is our agreed way of showing up? If someone is struggling, do we want to take work off of them? Do we want to create more space? How do we want to show up when things get difficult? Effectively like a team contract or a team charter, or depending on the shape of organization team, you may come up with your own team vision and values. And as long as those aren't wildly different or creating tension against the organizational vision and values, that's fine. If they're kind of microcosm of the organizational vision and values, that's fine. And again, I just think that's really helpful because then we understand and we've all agreed to, here is what good looks like. Here is how we want to show up. It won't mean that everyone's perfect, but when someone's pulling against that or struggling or showing up differently, there's something to point to and say, do you remember when we had that conversation? We said, when the pressure's on, here's what we're going to do. It feels like you're not in that place at the moment. What's happening? What do you need? How do we handle that? It gives you something kind of outside of the personal stuff to acknowledge and use as a framework. And I think that's a really helpful way of approaching it.
I think there's a couple of really important points in what you just said. The idea as if you're coming into a team, to have those conversations with the team that has maybe already existed. So you're coming in as the new leader, basically giving people that opportunity to have ownership and to have input rather than just coming and saying, I'm the new leader, let me throw this flag down and, and you're going to do what I say because I'm the boss, right? And I think that a lot of leaders who are inexperienced will come in that way because they see the leaders, the bosses on the various TV shows that they watch or the books that they read or bosses they've had themselves. And they come in and say, I'm the boss. You're going to do what I say or you're going to lose your job. But that's not the way you create a high performing team. That's the way you begin a toxic culture.
It's also a way to destroy your bottom line because turnover is expensive. So if it does like you lose your job, you're just asking for trouble.
Absolutely. So let's flip that. I am working with a client right now who's undergoing a huge transformation, a 180-degree turn in the way that they do things inside their organization in response to market pressure. If I'm a leader and I'm having a lot of resistance to a necessary transformation, how can I bring my team that, has known me for a long time and trusts me, but they're not quite sure about this new direction that we're headed?
So when market forces are driving change, and I've led organizations through this is familiar ground for me. I think you have to be as open as you can possibly be with your people. So imposing a change on and saying, this is just what we're doing now, when you could explain there are market forces at play for the, for the thriving of this organization, we're going to need to shift course. That's the first place, is to tell the truth and give people, there are lots of cultures in which stuff is hidden unnecessarily. Whereas I think if you are as open with people as you can be, people respond well to that. And there's always a slight caution, because sometimes you don't want to create fear. You don't want to say we have to do this or we're going under. That's not great stability from a leadership perspective. But helping people understand that we're not doing this for the fun of it. We're not doing it without good cause. We'd love you to be a part of it. We need your involvement, I think, is the first thing. Sharing the challenge and inviting people to co-create the solution is one of the most powerful things you can do. And again, it's with caution. I think sometimes when leaders are under pressure, they go, I know the answer. This is the answer. Now we need you all to deliver on it.
Yeah.
But most organizations, and organizations are complex, there will be detail within that the leader cannot know the ins and outs of. So it's so valuable to share the overall direction of travel with people and invite their engagement and set the frame on that. So the frame is not, tell me all the ways this won't work. The frame is, tell me where the risks are and help me mitigate them. And then people feel listened to, they feel engaged, they feel important, they start feeling like my involvement in this could be the difference that makes the difference, and I want to be a part of it. Now, you will sometimes get people who just dig in and are not willing to be a part of it. You have to address that. You have to sit down with it, give them their opportunity for engagement. But if it's clear that they will obstruct that future, as long as you have heard their fears, understood the risks from their perspective, and been as open and authentic as you can with them, then I think sometimes you have to let some people go. Not everyone can make those big changes and be okay with that.
Yeah.
But I think the key to success in major transformation is engagement, because it de-risks. Change has risk. And if you engage and let people own their part of the change, you de-risk it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You mentioned earlier, like if you go to a job interview and you're not bringing your whole self, you're going to be in a situation where you're not thriving. It's no different than if you're going to do a transformation. If you're not going to thrive in that situation, you're going to be much happier moving on somewhere else, even if it's, not something you ever thought you would do.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit to, you mentioned in your bio that you thrive on mentoring female leaders, women leaders. How has that changed your perspective on teams and their dynamics?
Well, we talked a moment ago about sometimes people are struggling with a change and the right thing for them is to move on. One of the things I have noticed is at an individual level, sometimes people find themselves in that situation and they can't get with it. They feel bruised. They feel like it's not the right place for them. So they move on. And 6, 9, 12 months into that new role, they find themselves feeling the same feelings. And one of the things I have observed is we often look outside of ourselves for the answers. We think the difficulties, the problems, the challenges are out there. And look, they often are, particularly in corporate life. But so often, the real opportunity is for us to look at what's going on within us. What I have learned is that to be a great leader, you have to heal. And we don't talk much about things like healing in the professional corporate world. It sounds a little bit woo, just sounds a little bit female and emotional to talk about healing. And, professional life still works under fairly male structures. But if you think about it, think about that colleague that shows up with bad behavior or snarls at people, or think about that leader that just will not listen and it's my way or the highway. If you think about everything that doesn't work in business, it's people responding from wounds. It's wounded parts of people showing up. It's insecurities, it's fears, it's need for control, it's aggression, everything that doesn't work. Because everything that does work is, I'm a human being, so I'm not going to be perfect, but let's talk about it. I can give and receive feedback, and that's okay. We can make things happen. We can engage. We can talk. We can listen. Everything that goes wrong in business comes from a wounded part of someone driving something, not willing or able to see the big picture, not willing to listen, being guarded, being defensive, being aggressive. being out of control, over emotional, taking things out on people. These are the aspects of being human that are from the bits of ourselves that we haven't looked at and dealt with. So one of the things I've learned in my later career phase is that in order to succeed, we have to heal. We have to do our healing work, which is why I started. Well, I didn't start life as corporate leader, but I started my greatest phase of success as in corporate leadership, and then moved into psychology and then coaching and then healing work and emotional release work, is because I can teach you all the leadership skills in the world. I can teach you how to align an organization and transform it. But if several of the pivotal players in that mix are acting from wounded places, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about, how have my damaged, parts of me showed up, and how often have I allowed that damaged piece of me to be the piece that people see, right? Instead of the parts that are, undamaged or unwounded, right? As you mentioned.
Yeah.
So, on that note, if I'm a leader, in your mind, what is one habit that I should develop to help and continue to inspire high performance in my team?
Mindfulness. Mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness every day of the week. This was my specialism when I did my psychology masters back in the day. And it is also the habit that kind of saved me when I was in the most high pressure corporate leadership. And I was in a really high pressure role, and there were bad behaviors around me on occasion. And I got to a point, and I was like, now I actually have a structured mindfulness practice that might be 1 or 2 hours a day most days. Back then, I had full-time work, high pressure, 3 kids. I managed maybe 15, 20 minutes several times a week. But it allowed me to maintain composure and choose my response in the face of high pressure, difficult moments, political moments, bad behavior, rather than reacting. And I would say earlier in my career, there was quite a lot of reaction. I might show up in ways that later I felt a bit uncomfortable about, or I would get feedback, wasn't brilliant, and then I'd be all defensive about that feedback, like I was reacting. When I developed a mindfulness practice, it gave me the composure to not react in the moment, but to breathe, to take a pause, but to choose my response. And from that moment of sort of spaciousness, I developed the art of always choosing responses that were in service of the best outcome for me and the people around me, which never looks like, an emotional reaction. And, I really believe in the benefit of feminine energy in the leadership context. I always had a good balance between masculine and feminine energy. And I think there is a tendency to perceive that emotion is the preserve of like the feminine energy space, and that somehow it's wrong to close that down. But actually, I was very human. I was very in with my emotions. I just didn't have them come out onto other people. So I would become aware of what I was feeling and make a choice. So, sorry, my notifications are pinging all over the shop.
No worries.
So I would experience an event, notice the trigger, notice what was coming up in myself, breathe, make a choice, and respond in the way that would create the best outcome. Now, that was not an overnight thing. That took many years of developing myself to have that level of self-control. But it was really supported by that daily mindfulness or regular mindfulness practice, because what that does is create the neural pathway. If all you ever do is in the moment try and contain yourself, well, you might repress, things might squeeze out in other ways. Whereas when you really build the neural capacity to remain calm and composed, it comes more readily. It's a bit more natural. It's a bit more fluid. So mindfulness would be absolutely my recommendation. And that's not the same as just any old meditation.
I think it's important to also recognize that when you react, you are giving away your power. You're allowing someone else to create an environment or a feeling inside of you that isn't yours, right? Like that, having that ability to be mindful gives you that control that so many people are seeking, right? And when you get reactionary, you've just given up that opportunity to control your own future, your own destiny, your own experience.
I absolutely agree with that. I often talk to people about the concept of radical responsibility, taking responsibility for everything you experience, not because it's right or true, but because it is the single most empowering decision you can make to own all of it. And the reality is, sometimes people will do things in professional environments in order to maintain control, in order to create a reaction, in order to see you lose your shit so that you go smaller, they are bigger. It's just a sad fact of life. I'm sure many people listening have experienced this. How powerful and beautiful to not respond, not react to that in the expected way, but simply to gracefully be fine, be cool-headed. It is an absolute act of empowerment. You're right. And I frame it as radical responsibility. How I show up is one of the few things in this world I have 100% control over. But it often doesn't feel like it, right? It's a practice.
Right. No, it feels like I'm abdicating my ownership by not, getting in the ring with this person. But in reality, the ultimate act of radical responsibility, as you said, is recognizing that I can control only what I can control to the extent of my fingertips. And beyond that, it's on someone else to control and moderate their own decision making. And if we can't come into alignment, then maybe we're not the team to work together.
That's true. And the other thing I learned from my own experience is that when you move to that place, other people, the people around you, see really clearly what's going on. Like when you learn to keep your own powder dry, you don't look weaker. People see really clearly what's actually happening. So we may, just like you said, we may think, no, I've got to argue this thing back. I've got to show, I've got to meet fire with fire. I've got to be strong. Quiet strength. When you embody quiet strength in the ways we're talking about, the onlookers see really clearly, who might be needling for a reaction or who might be behaving badly. So it's, again, I think we sometimes fear, well, I might seem weak if I don't stand out against this, or I need to say something to manage this message back, or I need to bring other people into my corner and make them see my opinion. The truth needs no defense, actually. And so these things kind of naturally become visible if you focus your effort and attention on showing up in alignment with what you know and believe good looks like. If you show up with your own values and don't allow anything else to prod you into reacting differently.
Well, I could talk to you all day, but if one of our listeners has really been impacted, they found, they really want to connect with you or they want to learn more about what you have to offer, where can they find you online?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Victoria Stakelum. I always welcome new connections. And you can also visit my website, thesuccesssmith.com, thesuccesssmith.com. There's one more S in the middle there than you're expecting. And there are various free resources in there. There's an app you can download with free resources on confidence, and lots of other podcasts and blogs and all sorts of lovely information to help people be at their best more of the time professionally and create success on their own terms.
Amazing. So considering other thought leaders like yourself, who else should we be talking to on Taking Back Monday?
So I would send you in the direction of my friend and client, Lisa Mercy, who is an HR specialist and does a lot of work around people and culture and coaching and really from an HR perspective, developing healthy, good, high performance businesses and teams.